Hello, and thank you for turning in to OCA Greater Houston's Happy Fest. My name is Tian. Oh, you're on mute.
Hey, my name is Young.
Right.
We are also volunteers and co-moderators for tonight. Yes, for Happy Fest Q&A.
If you're joining us on YouTube, please remember that you can leave your comments and questions in the live chat, please.
And it is our great pleasure to have both filmmakers for Fighting for Family and Kobe and Stephen Are in Love. First, we will be talking to Lan Nguyen, director of Fighting for Family. So welcome. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to start off with a question about so how did you get a hold of Chu and Rex's story, and what drew you to their story?
Yeah, Chu and Rex I met through my community organizing network. So before I started working on the film as a filmmaker, I was involved in the movement to end Southeast Asian deportations as a community organizer. So some of my work looked like supporting families who were at risk of being separated by deportation. I would do things like accompany people to their ICE check-ins. So what that looks like is when folks are at risk of being deported, they have to check into ICE every couple of months. And when they check into ICE, we don't know if they're going to be coming back out of the ICE office or if ICE is going to take them and deport them then and there. So it's a very scary experience. So community members, we've set together a network where folks, sometimes folks' families aren't able to accompany them. So we have volunteers accompany them so that they're not alone in that really scary process. So I was involved in doing work like that, doing intakes, getting people's needs, helping folks get pardons. Pardons are one of the few ways in which people can get relief from being deported. So really active in the movement as a community organizer. And in my work, I noticed that within our Vietnamese community, there were many community members who were very receptive and supportive of the work, but unfortunately, I found that there were also, unfortunately, like community members who were saying, you know what, like, yeah, we should deport these people. And from my conversations with those folks, it seemed like it stemmed from a misunderstanding of the situation. Many of those folks have never been in community with formerly incarcerated folks before. They aren't aware of, they don't have direct relationships with people who are formerly incarcerated. So they might believe in, harmful stereotypes, whereas I have been in community with these folks before. And, these people, many of these folks that I am in community with are like my family, very trusted members of my family who have really big hearts. So I wanted to show the Vietnamese community and also the broader public that just because someone was convicted of a crime does not mean that they are a quote unquote like bad person, right? People are capable of change. Many times people commit crimes for survival, like we see in the film. They never were quote unquote bad people in the first place. They had to commit crimes because of the systems that they were put in. And then also many people are wrongfully convicted of crimes. So in Chu's case particularly, he pled guilty to having more substances than he actually had, and in order to get a better deal. And that is part of our legal system, the flaws of our legal system. So I really wanted to expose these injustices and to gain empathy for the people in the situation of being formerly incarcerated and being at risk of deportation. So I had reached out to my network of Vietnamese community organizers who were working on Southeast Asian deportation. And Anthin, the lawyer that you see in the film, who is very well spoken and so powerful, introduced me to Chu and Rex. And I had spoken to them over video chat, and they were just so kind and generous to share their story with me, and also so brave to share their story with the world. So I am forever grateful for their bravery, and I hope that folks who watch the film also feel that sense of gratitude for them as well.
Wow, that's beautiful. I think you've definitely already touched on this, matters of like deportation and family and incarceration is what did you hope the focal point would be for this film? Was it a call to action for family, or is this a way to highlight the systemic rules happening right now?
Yeah, so what did I hope folks would get away from this film? I think that was multifold. So on a personal level, I wanted folks to fall in love with the family, because the family, Rex and Chu and their children, are so beautiful. So, I didn't want this to just be a story that was sad, portraying this family as a sad victim of deportation, which they are so much more than that. We see in the film moments of joy. They send each other Facebook videos, they send each other, they Skype each other, they visit each other every now and then when they can. And there's so many moments of joy and love. And I think that in many ways shows such a stronger connection between that family than even families who are not separated have. So I believe that their love has transcended borders in a way that has made their love even stronger than families who are not separated physically. So I wanted to portray the film as a love story and show that joy and happiness in addition to the pain. And then on a bigger policy level, I wanted audiences to question legal policies, question the necessity of things like ICE and deportation and prison. So questioning stereotypes that might exist in people's minds of do we need ICE? Do we need prisons? And I think especially in this current crisis with what's going on with the protests to defund police, I think it's especially relevant with the systems of why are we spending so many of our tax dollars on systems that do not protect our community, but instead actively harm our communities? A lot of our tax dollars are going towards ICE. ICE does not protect our communities. ICE separates our families. And why are our tax dollars going there? Similarly to prisons and to policing. So I wanted folks to really think about that and also think about political engagement beyond just voting in a two-party system. We see in the film that in the past presidential legacies, we have both Democratic and Republican presidents passing policies that harm this beautiful family and a lot of other families like them. So really thinking about, how can we imagine a new future where our governments protect us and invest in us rather than harming us?
Thank you so much.
Right. And as you talked about, these, the way the systems are set up, sometimes they definitely don't support the people as they should. And I want to talk a little bit about how these systemic rules and discrimination, they aren't just present in the U.S., but also in Vietnam as well. And so Cha and Rex's family are amongst the ethnic minorities of Vietnam. I'm sure they do face discrimination. So how do you think this mirror their situation in the U.S. and Vietnam?
Yeah, I think that what's happening in Vietnam with the Montagnards is very similar to what has happened in the United States with Native Americans. So for folks who aren't familiar, Montagnard folks are different groups of indigenous tribes who live in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. And the Vietnamese majority ethnic group, the Kinh people, had colonized that land and had made it part of the Vietnamese country. However, these indigenous people had their own system of government. That has been their land. They have their own customs. They don't speak Vietnamese. They speak their own indigenous languages. And a lot of what's happening, both by the Vietnamese government and before the Vietnamese government, the French colonizers and also the United States CIA went in and did a lot of things that mirrored what's happening or what has happened to the Native American population in the U.S. Policies like not allowing them to teach their native languages in school and mandating that they learn Vietnamese, similar to how Native American children in the U.S. Are forced to learn English rather than their native languages, going as far as forbidden languages from being spoken. And also in Vietnam, recently there's been a push to bring the ethnic majority folks, the Kinh folks, to move into the Central Highlands of Vietnam and live in that space that was never really theirs to begin with. So the government is almost busing non-indigenous people into the indigenous lands to colonize the lands. So I think that the question here is not necessarily like, what is the Vietnamese government, but particularly as a government, doing wrong, but more of a question of like, why do governments and nation states colonize other people, and how do indigenous people all across the world, how can we better support indigenous people in their sovereignty? Not only, you know, the Montagnard people in Vietnam, but also the Native Americans here and all across the indigenous people all across the world.
We have a question from the audience as well, from Mercedes Wood. What role did the lawyer play that was there at the airport, and was he there as continuous support against the ICE case?
Yeah, so the lawyer, his name is Thin. He, as we see in the film, Chu says that Tin is like his brother and like a family member. So Tin is very close with the family. He has been actively supporting Chu's immigration case, really trying his best to prevent Chu from being deported. However, the systems were not on our side. And so he has been supporting them since Chu got detained by ICE, and is continuing to support them today. Tin is also involved with an organization that we see featured in the film called SEAC Village, and Kat, the woman at the airport, is the director of SEAC. And so this organization empowers folks who are impacted by deportation to be organizers. So SEAC has since started a fellowship that Chu is a part of. So Chu is a fellow with SEAC, and his role in the organization is not only is he learning how to be an organizer and learning from these organizers in Vietnam. So he is in Vietnam, but the group is based in North Carolina, and they are collaborating, you know, virtually online via Zoom and whatnot to learn from each other. And Chu is organizing a network of folks who have been deported in Vietnam to do mutual aid and to do mentorship, and really like creating a community in Vietnam for folks who have been deported. So Tin and Kat are not only like, you know, play a role in supporting Chu's family, you know, by helping raise funds and also by helping with the legal cases, but they're also empowering the family to become organizers in their own ways.
And I think there's another question from the audience. Let's see. You mentioned a lack of understanding from the Viet community with those at risk of deportation. What are your thoughts on the immigrant identity among sanctioned refugees versus undocumented refugees?
Yes. What are your thoughts on immigrant identity among state-sanctioned refugees and undocumented refugees? So if I'm understanding this question correctly, I believe the audience member is asking about a separation between quote-unquote legal immigrants and undocumented immigrants. I think that might be the way that I'm interpreting that. So thoughts on this idea of legality. I think that oftentimes within our, you know, I think a prime example is within, I'm active in Orange County community organizing. So Orange County has some of the biggest Vietnamese populations in the country. And unfortunately, our local governments in Orange County do not represent the views of the Vietnamese community at large. So from what I've seen on the ground with community organizations, is many of our Vietnamese community members are in solidarity with undocumented people. But we see our local elected officials in Orange County being anti-immigrant. So we see them doing things like suing the state of California. The state of California has a sanctuary law where, like, for example, you cannot have collaboration between the police and ICE, and, you know, ICE can't enter schools and churches. So the state of California passed a set of laws like that to protect the undocumented community. And we see a lot of really anti-immigrant acts from the Vietnamese elected officials in Orange County saying, you know what, like, we're going to sue California because we do not want to protect undocumented immigrants. And we see a lot of really anti-immigrant sentiments from the elected officials there, who are in fact Vietnamese. However, last year, when there was a lot of news around Vietnamese refugees being deported, there was a lot of news coverage. The elected officials felt pressured to release a statement saying that they were supporting the folks who were at risk of being deported, because they were Vietnamese. And they really utilized this narrative of like, we support them because they came here legally, like they came here as children of refugees. They are refugees themselves. They fought alongside the US. They their family members died for our country. So they really tie into this narrative of like, these Vietnamese people did something for the US, therefore we should protect them. They have the paperwork, so we should protect them, whereas these other people should not be protected. So that, I think that is very hypocritical of those elected officials to do that. However, we do see community members speaking out against that. A lot of the groups that I'm involved in that do anti-deportation work, it's all anti-deportation. We're not just trying to stop the deportation of Southeast Asian refugees, but we're working to abolish ICE. We're working to abolish prisons and even, go past abolishing ICE, but also defending our Black community members who may not be at risk of being deported, but they're still suffering in prisons. So I think truly this work of, like the work behind this film is more than just how can we bring this one family together, but it's a lot bigger than that. Like, not only how do we unite, these five people, individuals, but it's also, how can we stop the deportation of Southeast Asian refugees? How can we stop all deportations? How can we abolish ICE and abolish prisons so that, no families get separated? So I think that the bigger picture here is really like a picture of solidarity and unity. And I hope that the film portrays that message of family separation is bad. It doesn't matter who you are, what your legal status is, what race you are. It's a human story that I hope transcends all these identities.
I think we have one of our last questions is for today is what kind of efforts do you see leading the change to, like you touched on, like towards solidarity, and as well as protecting these first and second generation refugee and immigrant families? And like, how best, okay, that's one question. And of course, continuing on is how best should the audience get involved if they would like to?
Yeah, so I think that there are many ways. So I see that at the bottom of the screen, the website pops up here and there. So please go to the film's website, which is fightingforfamilyfilm.com. There are many links with resources on how to get involved. One quick and easy way is to donate directly to Chu and Rex. So you see in the film that Tin is supporting the family pro bono. He's a part of their family, chosen family. But unfortunately, what's happening in Chu's case is that they are trying to reverse Chu's conviction. Like I mentioned before, Chu had pled guilty to having more substances than he actually had in order to get a better deal. It was not a good deal at all. But the legal system is messed up. So he had pled guilty to having more than he actually had. So they're hoping to reverse the charge to actually have it reflect the amount that he actually had, which would thus be too small of an amount to be a deportable offense. So that's what they're working on. And unfortunately, that is not Tin's area of expertise. So they're working with a lawyer who is more well-versed in post-conviction relief. And that lawyer is unfortunately unable to do pro bono work. So what will really help right now is if folks are able to donate, to please go to fightingforfamilyfilm.com, and you can donate directly to the family's GoFundMe to help them with their legal fees. Some other bigger systemic things, there is a law right now that is being introduced in Congress called the New Way Forward Act. We see in the film that in 1996, there were a lot of harmful laws passed under the Clinton administration that harmed Southeast Asian and probably all immigrants, that really expanded the amount of people who were able to be deported. What else did it do? It took away the ability for a judge to consider the situation. So before 1996, a judge could be like, okay, yeah, you committed a crime, but that was 10 years ago, and the crime, and you have reformed since, you're involved in the community, you have a family, so I will not deport you. So the judge had that power previously, but after 1996, that power of a judge canceling deportation was taken away. So under a New Way Forward Act, the power for a judge to make those considerations would be given back. So on my website, fightingforfamilyfilm.com, there are resources on how you can get in touch with your elected officials to support this bill. And then also, get in solidarity with the protests going on, it is very important to think about where our tax dollars are going and how we are, whether we are citizens or not, we are spending a lot of our income on taxes, and we should have a say in where those taxes go, and we should be making sure that we're investing in our communities and in systems that are going to protect our communities and help our communities thrive. And those systems are not ICE, it's not the police, it's not prisons. So I really encourage people to think about how you can get involved in this movement to make sure that your tax dollars are going to things that are going to make our communities thrive rather than suffer.
Right. Wow, yes, money talks. Yeah, thank you so much. And well, thank you, Ms. Lan Nguyen, for directing an amazing documentary about all the above, love, resilience, and everything. Oh, right. Before we go, we do have an important question. Your short film was partially also about representation. And what also is also about representation is, Tian, take it away.
The 2020 census is coming up, and wait, I'm sorry, give me a minute. I think my internet is lagging.
Good.
So not just in the media, but civic engagement, the 2020 census is very important. So it's important to remember that it's a census year and election year. So it's a crucial time to make a difference. So why do you think it's important, even during lockdown, to do our due diligence?
Yes. So like I was saying earlier, money is very important for our community. So the census determines the amount of funds that our communities get for things like schools, restoring our roads, all sorts of things that are very integral to making our communities thrive. So filling out the census is going to help our communities get more resources, which we can then devote towards things that we really care about, like schools and hospitals and things of that nature, which will help our community thrive. And then also going off of that, the Montagnard community in particular, I believe there's no box for Montagnard, so they have to check other. So keeping in mind that how our communities are represented and fighting for having all of those boxes to correctly identify all of our communities, so they're not just other.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I think that's about all the time that we have for today for this interview. So thank you, Director Lan Nguyen, for joining us tonight. And remember to follow Director Lan Nguyen on social media. So yeah.
Thank you
so much. Right. So I think that completes our 5th day of films. And following this Q&A, we'll lead into tonight's feature, Love Boat, Taiwan, and talk to director Valerie So immediately after. So please stay tuned. The feature program will begin right after these videos.
Yes, and before we end, I'd like to acknowledge the current racial injustices, particularly against our Black communities. We hope to stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. So please remember to visit this tiny URL to learn concrete Houston-specific ways to be involved.
Right. We'll also be conducting like a special panel next week to discuss the current climate and ways we can engage and implement our calls to action. So please stay tuned for more details.
So thank you for joining us at Happy Fest, and we'll see you back shortly.
We would like to acknowledge the grief and outrage right now, especially within our Black communities. Our city, Houston, continues to hurt. George Floyd was a native Houstonian, and according to the Houston Chronicle, we have had 6 police killings this past month alone.
As Asian Americans, we have to acknowledge and interrogate our own anti-Blackness and relative privilege within American society. We have to actively unlearn our own biases. It was Black activists who pushed against racist naturalization laws and supported Asian Americans after the racist murder of Vincent Chen.
Black activists stepping into action have benefited our community in profound ways. We must move beyond being a bystander and join the larger movement of Black Lives Matter. Join us in donating, protesting, petitioning, educating ourselves, and supporting our Black brothers and sisters in whatever way we can. Visit tinyurl.com/BLMAAPI, all caps, for more detailed ways to help, including Houston-specific bail funds, scripts to call local representatives, and translated letters to our family members, all of which you can join us in doing in between screenings. On behalf of OCA Greater Houston and the Happy Fest Committee, thank you for joining us on this podcast.